Cursed Village. The eerie aftermath of confronting child-eating witches. Witches eat children horror story. This story was told to me by my grandmother, and I am sure it is true because my grandmother always saw life with a lot of sobriety. She was never superstitious, nor too devout. She did have faith, but she was not one of those people who try to convince you that her God is the right one. So behind her story, I don't think there was an intention to convince us to believe her. She believed it, and that is enough for me. I go on to tell the story. On the ranch where she lived, the houses were far apart from each other and everyone knew each other. She was young and lived with her parents and siblings. The family's livelihood was the planting of corn and beans. They did have a few animals, but only for home consumption, nothing for sale. A place like any other, with its good and bad things, but all normal. Things changed when a child disappeared in a nearby house. The boy's parents told how they put him to bed to sleep, locked the door as usual, and at dawn he was simply gone. The father ran to the door, and it was locked just as he had left it, which was strange since his house had no windows, so it was the only possible way out. The family became hysterical and asked all the neighbors for help. Everyone in neighboring ranches searched for him for days, but to no avail. There was a second child missing. It was at that time that the rumor began to spread that a witch was haunting the ranches. No one was suspicious. It was believed that the witch came from the bush and would leave if they blessed the houses. That's what everyone did. Of course, they asked for the help of the parish priest. The village priest went and blessed each of the houses and suggested that they put scissors under the children's beds. After that, it was quiet for a few days. One afternoon, a little girl, about 14 years old, came to the village with a basket of cheeses, offered them, sold a few, and then left. The girl came back the next week and the following week. On one of the occasions that she went to sell cheese, she was seen going into the house of one of the neighbors. She was there all afternoon. In the house, there was only the man and the baby. The wife was at church. The girl left before nightfall. The woman was very surprised when she arrived and realized that her baby was gone, and her husband did not know how to give her any kind of explanation. A few days later, my grandmother and the people of the village found out that the same thing had happened in a rancher. The little cheese girl had gotten involved with a man who had a baby at home, and when she left, the baby was nowhere to be seen. It was quite clear that it was a witch, but those two cases were different from the first two, since in the first two, the babies disappeared in the early morning without anyone seeing anyone come in. One of my grandmother's brothers made a wise suggestion. Maybe they were two witches, operating differently, so people would only focus on catching one while the other kept stealing babies for who knows what macabre purpose. To everyone's surprise and disbelief, the little girl returned to the village where my grandmother lived. The mother of the baby that girl had taken stood up to her and slapped her. The girl rubbed her face in what she had done to her husband and then left laughing. As the days went by, the woman who had hit the young witch began to get sick. She began to turn pale. She could not eat since she vomited everything she ingested, nor could she sleep. The worst was when the hand with which she had attacked the girl began to turn black. Her husband had to take her to a doctor. The man returned 2 days later. He came alone. His wife had died. He did not last long. The night of that weekend, he was seen leaving his house. He was as if he was hypnotized. They say that a white owl was perched on the roof of his house. A week later, another infant disappeared on the ranch. It was not a baby. It was a girl of about 10 years old. She was a friend of my grandmother. They used to play together. It was there that my grandmother started to feel really scared, because if they had taken her friend, she could be next. It kept her awake at night. Yes, they looked for her, of course, although everyone knew they were not going to find her because she had been taken by the witch. 4 days passed, and another abduction occurred. It was a newborn, a firstborn. That was why the father armed himself with gun and machete and went out to look for his son. He found him, well, his corpse. It was in the middle of the bush, next to the remains of a dark ritual. There were chicken heads, animal bones, and strange symbols in the ground. Witches eat children. Horror story. The next day, the little cheese girl returned, jumping and laughing, as if mocking, enjoying all the pain that her actions were causing. Everyone hid in their homes, including my grandmother. No one dared to confront her. With the death of the one who had slapped her, it was clear that it was a bad idea to mess with her. But that mattered little to the grieving father who had just lost his firstborn. That man came out with a loaded shotgun, and without giving time to look, he unloaded all the bullets he had, knocked the witch down, killed her. Everyone was really shocked. Some came out of their houses to see the witch's corpse. They were very surprised to discover that the witch was not a young girl, but an old woman. Her dazzling appearance was only the result of a spell. There was calm for a week, and absolutely nothing happened to the gentleman. That gave courage to the others. So when they saw the other witch trying to sneak into a house, all those who had weapons went to fill it with gunpowder. The witch tried to escape, but she did not succeed. She also died. The 2 witches were dead. It seemed that the days of terror were over, but a month later one of my grandmother's brothers disappeared. That could only mean 2 things. The first option is that a 3rd witch had arrived, and the second option is that one of the neighbors from the nearby ranches and the surrounding area was a witch. All the people who were gathered in the house where my grandmother lived turned to look at each other, hoping that the culprit would give herself away. It didn't happen, but they did notice one thing. Everyone who lived nearby was there, all except one person, Rita, the old madwoman. That lady had had a bad reputation since she arrived. She was a harpy. She was always on the lookout for what the others were doing to be talking, to spit her venom and invent gossip. My grandmother says that it is understandable that she did it, since she was a lonely woman who had no one in the world because no one could stand her. Everyone, including my grandmother and my grandmother's father, went to that lady's house. And as soon as they were close enough, they noticed that a really disgusting smell was coming from inside the house. Several men entered, among them my grandmother's father, covering their noses and mouths. The woman was praying, surrounded by candles. The woman, when she noticed the presence of the men, made a completely unnatural movement, jumped up and hung upside down on the ceiling, looking at the men with hatred. She tried to intimidate them, but could do nothing to prevent the bullets from piercing her body. That was how the children stopped disappearing. Incidents of that nature never happened again. But, and this my grandmother told me with fear, during the nights of the full moon, mysterious fireballs hovered around the area. They did not attack anyone, but they did cause a lot of fear. Not so much because of the horrible face they had in the center, but because of the laughter they emitted when they flew near a person. Thank you for joining us for this spine-tingling story. We hope you found it both thrilling and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this video, please consider participating in our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with your friends. Your support goes a long way in helping us create more engaging content for you. Goodbye, and may you always tread carefully in the world of the unknown.